Do you want to just touch the psychological safety thing, actually? Because that was an interesting one that
why not?
might be,
Yes,
might be
psychological
useful.
safety. That
So
sounds
I'm not talking, and I stress, I'm not talking about, this is a term that long predates the current woke culture of being safe spaces. It actually has nothing to do with that. What you're talking about there, a psychologically safe environment, is one that you can be a reasonable approximation of yourself in a work setting. Because let's be honest, we're all slightly different people depending on who we're talking to. I'm quite different with my parents to my partner to sat here with you. We all have ideally we would all be roughly ourselves, but steer that in a direction depending on what behavior is more useful to us.
So I think many Lotus Eaters viewers, and I know this because whenever I meet them or they post comments, will explain that they are not in a psychologically safe place because they have to hide their power levels at work all the time.
I am in that exact position where I hide my power levels extensively where I operate.
Yes.
So I sympathise with that. And that is, you do not have the ability to be yourself or speak your mind within reason, because let's be honest, in a work setting, if you're going to start doing certain things, that's not allowed. You're not allowed to, I don't know, call your colleague certain names, etc. You're expected to be at least a little bit professional.
Yes.
Outside of banter and all that kind of stuff.
Modicum of professionalism doesn't go astray.
So there's a sort of a version of you that you bring to work that's authentic, hopefully.
Yes.
But what I mean by that is also sort of comes back to the bit about making mistakes and ability to try different things and innovate and take initiative. Imagine two scenarios. You work for somebody who is constantly trying to get you to do things exactly their way, is catching all of your mistakes and criticizing you for them, and tells you have to behave in the exact certain way as they do, essentially.
Yes, I've worked with boomers.
Yeah, I've worked for people like that too.
Yes.
Well, yeah, there is a name for those people, and we call them boomers. Not all, to be fair. There are some great boomers out there, but equally, that is the very old school management thinking.
Yes.
And evidence exists. The reason psychological safety matters, by the way, just to frame it for the audience, is it is an essential component of getting high performance out of most people. Because if think about it, in that environment, are you the one I've just described where leaning over you, checking your stuff, trying to catch mistakes, expecting you to have done it exactly the way they would, expecting you to be precisely speaking in a certain manner and only behaving within a very corporate way or whatever it is, are you probably doing your best work? Because where are you expending your mental time and energy?
You're maintaining the visage, aren't you?
You're putting a mask on, essentially, to some degree. You're putting a mental mask of yourself on. Right. You're probably more worried about your boss catching your spelling and grammar mistakes than the quality of the document you've produced in general. Let's say you're writing the new Islander for shameless plug Islander 3.
Yeah, they wouldn't let me write it.
But say you were, and you're writing an article for it, and Carl's response, instead of saying, "Oh, it's a really interesting topic you've chosen for that, Dan," is to come over and say, "Well, you missed the T there, and that's wrong, and you didn't write this the way I would. Go rewrite that."
Yes.
Are you feeling particularly, but imagine you're not you and you're perhaps a more junior person that is more inclined to go, okay, and do it. Are you probably producing your best work in future, or are you now worried about what he's going to say next time when you come back with it and focusing on that rather than producing good work for the organization? That's sort of what I'm touching on, that it's difficult for people to do their absolute best for you unless they feel able to be more or less themselves, whatever version of it and work, and they feel it's okay to take initiative, make some minor mistakes and learn and grow. That's basically what you can boil the term down to.
Well,
and you will be amazed how hard that is for many organizations to understand.
I mean, actually, trying to encourage your staff to take initiative, risks, come up with ideas is like a key part of running an organization. If you can foster a culture where people regularly come to you and say, "I've had a bright idea," even if you shoot it down, you still love the fact that they came to you with something which is, "I think we should do this."
Yeah, I had to do that in the past with my team. We say, I love the enthusiasm. I really like that idea. We can't do it now. We haven't got the resources. Can we revisit that in 12 months or whatever? Let's come back to it. Please make a note. Put a note in your calendar. Come and annoy me about it at that point. But you're right. Initiative is fundamental in business improvement and change, which is basically the bit of HR I do. I change and improve stuff with people. And without that psychological safety, at best, they will take that risk of coming to you and saying that thing much less often. At worst, they will never do it.
Yes.
So you are stuck in whatever state your business is currently in, or it's dependent on you to make all the change, which is not a great situation to put yourself in as a business owner. So, this is what I mean by the psychology of the HR stuff is actually really valuable, because this sounds like common sense to you and I would imagine, but I have worked for enough organizations to know that it is certainly not common sense. In fact, it is a very poorly understood thing.
I'll tell you, I'm going to fire something else at you, which I have encountered before, and it's quite an interesting challenge to have. How do you manage up? I.e., you're more competent than your manager or your director, and you basically need to steer them in the right direction, but you can't be too overt about it. If it was an underling, you just tell them to do something. But when you're trying to steer somebody above you, is a bit more tricky, but sometimes that's actually necessary.
It's always a difficult one. I have to do this a lot, right? I am not at the top of an organization, but I have to frequently convince people at the top of an organization to give money to do things that will benefit them, basically.
Yes.
One way is to present it as their own, let them present it as their own idea. So I find in a lot of conversations, I drop something in, say, oh, have you thought about this thing and that? And, just suggest the thing.
Yes.
Don't push at all. Walk away. Come back a couple of weeks later, a couple of days later, whatever, you encounter that person on frequency. And they'll often come back to you and say, oh, this thing that you talked about, that was a really, I think I would like to sponsor that initiative. I think I'd like to get behind that. That sounds really good that we should do. So you let them feel it's their idea.
I've done a version of that, which is even more sneaky. And I've used this one quite a lot. It only works on individuals who don't have a great memory. But you talk about an idea in sort of vague terms, and you just let it percolate in their brain. And normally you do this in a social setting alongside something else, or you tag it to something so that it goes in there, but you're not too attached to it. And then you basically give it a couple of weeks, and then you come back to them and say, that idea you had about that thing, I've been thinking, I think you're right, actually. I think we should do that. And then I completely turn it around. And they remember it well enough to go, oh yeah, I did have that idea, didn't I? I must have talked. Yeah, okay, well it's my idea, so it must be right. And then you're away.
Confirmation bias and
yes,
yeah,
very sneaky, but it does work on
so that's the sneaky way. The more courageous way of doing it, and to be honest, it's the one I generally prefer, because I will play sneaky games where I have to with people. I'd rather just have a conversation most of the time. Yes. And I've reached the point where I'm a little bit long in the tooth, similar to you, a few shades of grey and the rest of it now, where I'm just going, oh, this is too much effort. I'll just try and have the conversation most of the time. Yeah. So for me, it's about how good is your relationship with that person, first of all. If your relationship is awful, this is going to be a hard conversation. But it's about, a lot of managers see suggestions from below as a challenge or an implicit criticism. So again, think about it. If I come to you and say, Dan, have you thought that we should do this way, this particular line this way, we should do brokenomics this way from now on? Yes. What is implicit in the thing I've said to you?
That I haven't optimized the system myself.
Could be better, basically, yeah.
Yes.
So there's an implicit criticism in there. If I say something like, I've been thinking, what we're doing now is really, really good. I wonder if there's any other ways we can improve it. Can we sit down and discuss a few ideas? You bring some, I bring some. And maybe you put some of those ideas on the table then. It's the same conversation, or you can even just say, look, if you disagree with someone, I respect the work for you. I'm not trying to challenge your decision, but I'd like to present a different perspective to you. Here's some thoughts I've got from my different position in the organization to you. I end up doing that quite a lot. I've done that with several CEOs, and to be fair to them, these were quite strong characters, as many CEOs tend to be. Most of them went, okay, I'll go away and think about that if you don't mind. Yes. Quite a few of them agreed to it later. So it's all about positioning. Are you familiar with push-pull communication?
No.
Push is essentially me telling you what you should do. Right. Pull is essentially me asking you what we should do and turning it into a back and forth. That would be a simple way of phrasing it. It's a bit more sophisticated than that, but that's...
Right.
People react, depending on their personality, stress level, the rest of it, to different types of communication, better or worse. So I'm someone that for example, I don't receive push communication at all well. If someone tells me I'm going to do something, my mental dialogue immediately goes, make me.
Yes.
That's what I literally have a little voice on my shoulder that says that. Whereas if you tell me, it'd be really beneficial if we could do this, would you mind?
Yes.
Okay, I'll consider that. I'll have a conversation. So it's similar with approaching managers a lot of the time. A lot of people make the mistake of going to them and saying, I saw it happen not that long ago in a last employer, where someone turned around and had a really good idea. It probably would have made them a lot of money, but the way they presented it to the person, they went to them and said, we should be doing this because it will make it more money. The implicit criticism is immediately that you weren't doing this and you weren't making as much money as you could be.
Yeah.
And the person went, well, we're not doing that. That was the end of it. No idea. That would have been millions a year. I suspect. I don't know because I wasn't involved in the details, but my guess is that's this market sector you've just discovered that nobody was tapping. You could have just cornered. Didn't get moved because someone approached the conversation the wrong way.
If you would like to see the full version of this premium video, please head over to lotuseaters.com and subscribe to gain full access to all of our premium content.